This time we'll have remarks. Damon L. Fordham. And Professor comes, then we'll be back in the hands of the pastor.
How's everybody doing this afternoon?
Wonderful.
I said, how's everybody doing this afternoon?
Wonderful.
All right, y'all, I'll be happy to be alive today. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, I bring you greetings from Reconstruction AME Church in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, where the Reverend Alonzo J. Reddick is the pastor. And I'd like to say also that this is my first time here in the township of Lincolnville, but I definitely don't intend for this to be my last.
All right.
Now, earlier, the pastor spoke about some of the exploits of the Reverend Richard Harvey Cain. But I have a little bit of, I'll take about 5 minutes, brief 5 minutes of your time to give you some examples, background to some of that. He mentioned earlier Bishop Daniel Alexander Payne. And what a lot of people don't know is this. After the Denmark-Vesey Rebellion, they made it illegal for African Americans to learn to read and write in Charleston, because Denmark-Vesey used history books as well as the Bible to encourage revolution. So Bishop Daniel Alexander Payne had a school for free enslaved children over on 125 Trash Street, downtown. And they shut down his school. But he did not let that extinguish the light, the lamp of knowledge. But not too long after that, he went up to Wilberforce, Ohio, where he started Wilberforce University, which was the first black university in America that was run top to bottom by black people. And that is where he encountered Bishop Richard Harvey Cain. Bishop Cain, as mentioned earlier, afterwards came to Charleston, where not only did he establish Mother Emanuel, but in 1867, he led a demonstration over on Marion Square to have the streetcars integrated. In 1867, well over 100 years before Martin Luther King, and not too long after that, he was part of the Constitutional Convention of South Carolina. This was where 48 whites and 76 blacks came together at the Charleston Clubhouse, where the federal courthouse is today on Meeting Street. And they planned to give South Carolina the democracy it had never had before. They called on such things as the establishment of the public school system. That was done by Brother Robert Smalls of Beaufort, South Carolina, who freed his family from slavery several years earlier. And among other things, the Reverend Richard Harvey Cain said these words. He said, I don't want the government to give us anything, but I want them to sell us land that we can buy, so we can have goats, sheep, cows, homes of our own, and so we can live a happy life, and black and white can come together on the basis of true equality. And so it was not too long after he said those words that he put his money where his mouth was and came up here and established Lincolnville. You see, he was not just a man of words, he was also a man of action. And not too long after that, as the pastor mentioned, in 1875, he went to Washington, D.C. in the House of Representatives to argue for a civil rights bill. One of the persons who spoke before him was Representative Zebulon Vance of North Carolina. And he spoke using the language of the time, of the Negroes being ignorant, barbaric, primitive, uncivilized, savage. And among other things, the Reverend Richard Harvey Cain got up and said, well, sir, you mean to tell me that you closed the lamp of knowledge to us to keep us from attending school? You make it illegal for many of our men to preach the word. You keep us out of the places of high culture and great knowledge. And then after all of that, you refer to us as ignorant? I have several words to you, Representative Vance. Shame on you. And those were some of the words that he used to argue for the Civil Rights Act of 1875. And not too long after that, in Hamburg, South Carolina, July the 8th, 1876, a mob of a Klan-type group called the Sweetwater Sable Club, led by Benjamin Tillman. For those who don't know, he was the architect of segregation in South Carolina. And 8 African-American men were massacred, shot in the back up there while trying to exercise their rights. And so down here in Charleston, on July the 17th, 1876, Reverend Richard Harvey Cain led 1,000 African Americans to march over on South Market Street, downtown. And when people saw them marching, they just stepped back. They'd never seen anything like this before. And in the midst of all this, a group of policemen tried to arrest a black man, and the crowd behind Reverend Richard Harvey Cain started shouting, "This ain't Hamburg! This ain't Hamburg! This ain't Hamburg!" The police let the guy go. Who says we can't get together and unite with something? So right after that, Reverend Richard Harvey Cain got up, and he made this great big bold speech. He said that he would say that it will not do to go too far with this thing. He said that, remember, there are 80,000 of us strong in South Carolina, young boys, young girls who have never known the lash of the white master and who have sworn before God never to allow ourselves to be shot down in the streets like dogs by reckless lawless regulators again. And that whatever we shall do, whether we shall use the knife, the torch, or Winchester rifles, we will put a stop to this thing if the government does not. You see, one thing about Reverend Richard Harvey Cain, he was a man. You see, when our young people today are looking for excellent role models to stand up and all of that, you can look at the story of people like Reverend Richard Harvey Cain. When you go to the movies and see the Black Panther movie, let me tell you something. You got a real Black Panther and the great Reverend Richard Harvey Cain. You didn't have the type of man who just sat and talked in the barbershop about what he wanted to do and I plan to do this and so on and so forth. No, Richard Harvey Cain went out and did. And I say in my brief conclusion to you that this is the kind of role model that you want for your young people. And so I encourage you to, just as the book of Romans 12:2 teaches us, that be ye not conformed to this word, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. Renew the young people's mind by teaching them of these things. Deuteronomy, 4th chapter, 9th verse teaches us to teach these things to thy sons and thy sons' sons. And this is what we have to do in regard to people like Reverend Richard Harvey Cain, because you see, and if we do these things, God will truly smile on us. And while I'm on that subject of God smiling on us,
And the people of the God say amen.